All right, Alexander, let's do a Q&A with regards to the live stream we did about a week ago with Robert Barnes, actually, but we're just now getting to it to answer all the questions. But these questions are actually relevant to what's going on today in the news, especially with regards to Trump and what's going on there. So let's answer some of these questions, and a lot of these answers will be very up to date as to what's going on at this moment. So let's begin with Radio Constantinopolis, which says Jewish advocacy groups are being purged fast in Russia. What's your take on this, and what do you think Israel is going to look like in a free Eurasia?
Well, I'm not going to answer the second question because I haven't a clue. But on the first question, I've heard this question. I've had this question put to me before about Jewish advocacy groups being purged in Russia. And I tried to carry out some research to verify this. And I've not been able to verify this. Are you sure you're getting correct information? Because I've not heard about this anywhere. The only piece of information that I do know about is that the chief rabbi apparently found himself in a very difficult position because he came under competing pressures, both from some Russian Jews who wanted him to support the military operation and from other people who wanted him to oppose it, and he decided to leave the country in order to get himself, distance from this pressure. But that's the only thing I've been able to find. I've heard nothing to suggest that Jewish advocacy groups are being targeted in that kind of way. And I'm sure if it were true, by the way, it would be all over the Western media, and it isn't. So I'm just wondering where you're getting this information, because it's not coming through to me.
All right. Jod Z says 100,000 army from North Korea will join Russia in the Ukraine to fight the neo-Nazis. Is it true, Alex Christoforou?
It isn't. It is not true. No way is it going to happen. There is no such possibility, believe me. The Russians don't need North Koreans coming to fight in Russia. In Ukraine for them. It's absurd. I mean, they've got a vast army. I mean, they don't need the North Koreans there. By the way, and just in parenthesis, and I just mentioned this in my own channel, all the things you've been hearing about an exchange of telegrams between Putin and Kim Jong-un, it's been all over the Western media again. You know, they were swearing supposedly some kind of alliance against the US together. These messages were completely routine, commemorating the end of the Second World War. And they're so routine that they've not even been mentioned on the Kremlin website. So, I mean, it just isn't. I mean, or the Russian official news agency TASS. So, I mean, let's put aside all this North Korean thing and Russia. I mean, the two countries are on reasonably friendly terms, but they're not allies, and North Korean troops are not coming to fight in Ukraine.
Dominique says, Patrick Moore, the sensible ecologist, co-founder of Greenpeace, author of books on the subject, promoter of CO2, would be the perfect guest for your video on CO2 issues.
Absolutely. I agree. I've heard of him, and I absolutely agree. We'll see if we can track him down.
David March says, if the Duran ever starts on time, that means the deep state has got to them.
David, well, don't worry.
Hunger the Die Merchant says, the rule of law was always a myth, like Santa Claus. It was only real when people believed in it. Read Pope Hasnas for the smarter legal justification.
I don't entirely accept that. I mean, it's not an... Go on, sorry, did I cut you off?
No,
yeah.
No.
I mean, I don't... I mean, I accept that nothing is ever... And I mean, the rule of law is an ideal. And of course, it's an ideal that is never fully achieved in real life. But it was an ideal which Western societies aspired to. And for the most part, came pretty close to adhering to. Now I think it's just fallen apart. I mean, as far as I can see, if we're talking about people like Merrick Garland, I mean, he sees law in a purely functional term as something he can use to achieve his political objectives. And that is the complete opposite of the rule of law concept as it was, once understood in the West.
All right, Sanjeva says, hey, A&A, love you guys. A big shout out to the great Robert Barnes for holding the flags of liberty and justice high. Thank you for that, Sanjeva. Hell Warden says, the FBI doesn't do super chats, but Patriots do. Thank you for that. Michael, thank you for the super sticker. Naboch says, thank you for that super sticker. Etienne says, sound is great. Love it when Barnes is on the show. Thank you, Etienne, for that. Mark Hill says, no midterms. Social unrest causes martial law to be enforced, allowing Democrats to remain in power.
I think if we are into that kind of scenario, we are into a crisis the like of which the United States has not seen. It would be a much bigger crisis than the one in 1860 and 1861, which led to the American Civil War or the war between the states. I mean, we would be in a situation of essentially of a coup.
All right, William Andrews says, is Alex really Justin? All I'm saying is I've never seen them in a room together. I'd watch out, gentlemen. Thank you for that, William. NNN, thank you for that super chat. John says, why DE is becoming a loser and how they will survive.
DE?
I think DE is in reference to Germany, I guess. Deutschland, maybe.
Oh, I suppose, yeah. Now, how will they survive? Well, they will survive. I mean, countries don't just disappear, and Germany's gone through much darker times, to be straightforward about it, than the one it's going to enter into. But what is particularly painful about this particular one, the time that they're going into, is that things were going pretty well in Germany, as I well remember, not so long ago. It's a country that was doing well. And it has screwed up in a most staggering way. When I remember the Germany of 1990, when the wall came down, and when I think of where we are now, it's astonishing how in this period of 30 years, all the possibilities Germany had have been squandered. And Germany is going to go through some very hard times over the next few years, and they're going to go on getting progressively worse for many years beyond that. I'm afraid that is the reality.
Jeffix says, do you think the U.S. and India military maneuvers not far from China-India border is to create tensions between China and India and therefore get them away from BRICS and start sanctions on Russia?
Yes, it is. I mean, the United States has been trying to forge an alliance with India for years. I mean, I can remember all the way back when we started the Duran. Narendra Modi visited Washington and gave a speech to Congress, and there was all kinds of excited commentary about how India was aligning with the US against China. And a lot of people still think that. And the Indians know it, and they make the most of it. They play this game of seeming to get very close to the US, and undoubtedly they do have problems with China. But always, when it comes to it, the Indians never go the full way. And I understand there's talks between China and India at the moment, and in fact, a Chinese official has actually said that relations have actually been improving over the last few weeks and months. India is a very big country. It sees itself as a great power. It knows that China ultimately cannot conquer India. That's an inconceivable thing. And at the same time, China is India's biggest trade partner. So they want to maintain a stable relationship with China. But at the same time, they want leverage over China, which is why they tilt sometimes towards the United States. And they also know that if they play up this story of the alliance against China, then they will get all kinds of concessions from the United States. I think the Indians are playing this game with extraordinary skill, and it shows that this is indeed a very sophisticated rising country that needs to be watched very carefully.
Antar Das says, Robert, can you adjust your camera up slightly? Thank you for that. Antar Orlando Santos says, brilliant work. Very, very sad the disinformation on offer all over the Western media. Thank you, Orlando, for that. John says, can North Korea really send 100,000 soldiers?
No.
Answered that. John,
thank
you very much.
I already answered that one. Yeah.
RDDR says, is liberalism imploding?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think, well, I mean, if you're talking about classical liberalism, the kind of liberalism that someone like, Voltaire would have recognized, or Mill, J.S. Mill, or people like that, doesn't exist. It's gone. I mean, that kind of liberalism was all about, I may not agree with your opinion, but I'll fight to the death for your right to protect it, to hold it. Well, that kind of liberalism doesn't exist anymore. What we have today is something that calls itself liberalism, but has nothing to do with the liberalism of the past. It's a kind of progressivist totalitarianism with a very ugly and rather whining streak.
Guy MIUSA says the U.S. is broken.
Well, it's not broken.
Violin Merchant says...
It's got problems, but don't say yet that it's broken.
Violin Merchant says, FBI is looking for JFK's brain for National Archives. Was hidden on the top shelf of the White House bathroom, too high for every POTUS since LBJ. White House approved warrantless search since Biden needs a new brain anyways.
What I would say is, if we implanted the brain of JFK into Sleepy Joe, well, it would certainly make a difference. I mean, it would be a giant change, an epochal change. The reality is that Biden couldn't tie JFK's shoelaces. I mean, that's the reality of it.
Deb G says, the judge that approved the raid had been Jeffrey Epstein's lawyer. He also donated to Jeb Bush's campaign.
Yeah.
Very true.
True.
Lumpia Logic says, are conservatives also outraged by the recent raids of FBI against the African Socialists' Uhuru movement in Florida and Missouri?
As a matter of fact, a lot of them are. I've been reading things on conservative sites, people who do care about, due process and the rule of law, and many of them have been highly critical of those raids. Now, I should say I don't know very much about this story. This isn't something I'm very familiar with, but I do know. You asked the question: are conservatives outraged by these raids? Well, some of them undoubtedly are, because I read comments from that say as much.
Cricket says, my guess, the papers are the papers that Trump declassified, and now because of the raid, they are now classified again. Mission accomplished.
Yeah. I mean,
Alex
I
Gunn
take
says,
your point.
if you guys do... Alex Gunn says, if you guys do content, short or long form, debunking anti-Russian hysteria, such as the YouTube shorts of Ryan Macbeth, your channel would grow a lot.
Well, we do what we can, but we're always willing to learn what others do.
Let's see. Alex Glanz, thank you for that super sticker. Swade's Lounge says, judge who signed the order is an Epstein attorney. Yes. Jeff Pearson says, Brian J. Auten knows the answer. Okay. Otnosen says, Mr. Barnes, can I add you on my dream team, next Trump admin for AG position or similar? Please tell us you'd consider the offer when it comes.
Well, we will have to pass that on to Robert, but I mean, I would love to see a person like him in a position where they could, in Washington, where he could actually make a difference. If Donald Trump wants some good personnel appointments, he should speak to Robert.
RKB says, with Trump raid, Biden regime is trying to provoke Civil War 2.0. Did people in 1860 or 1940 feel a sense of something bad is about to go down in a big way? I think everybody is feeling that now.
I think they do, and I think that is right. I think this is a momentous event. I think this raid was a momentous event. As Alex said, it's a week since we did that live stream with Robert, because obviously I've had to travel and it's been complicated. But even in that week, the rumblings are still there. I mean, I went on to Zero Hedge, first thing I did this morning, and there's still stories pouring out about it. The DOJ refusing to publish the affidavit, for example, setting out the case upon which it's based. Grassley saying that he wants to have it investigated if the Republicans gain control of Congress. So this is a huge event. It's not obviously the tipping point when we're going to go into an all-out crisis, but it's getting very close to it.
Jeff says Brian J. Auten knows the answer. The FBI is protecting the connection between him and Congress in part.
I'm not sure I follow that. Maybe Robert knows more about that than me.
I don't understand that. Thank you for the super chat. Sparky says, reminder, Trump fired interim AG Sally Yates. She replaced Chris Rye at the law firm King and Spalding when Chris became FBI director. Small world.
Well, absolutely. And I mean, there we go again. About Trump making some disastrous personnel picks. I mean, one of his worst was Chris Wray.
Yeah. Roman says, hello, gents. Will the EU close borders for Russians?
I think it's a very, very real possibility. I mean, there's a lot of pressure on it. I think on balance it won't happen. I gather even the European Parliament is balking at that idea. But don't hold your breath. Every time some really awful thing about Russians is proposed, it eventually happens. So I think it's possible. I still hope it won't.
Verde Bill, thank you for that super sticker. David S., thank you for that super sticker. War Wagon says, I've got two theories. First one, the FBI plants fake evidence of Trump orchestrating a Jan 6 conspiracy.
It's not impossible. I mean, we still don't know exactly what was taken. There was all sorts of crazy stories about, nuclear secrets and things, which I don't believe, frankly. Why would Trump want to walk away with nuclear secrets? But, it's entirely possible something like that could happen. But, let's wait and see. We don't yet know.
Kimberly, thank you for that super sticker. Ryan says they are going after Trump because the deep state understands the tides are turning. If they are successful taking out Trump by force, what do you think an additional 87K IRS agents is going to do to everyday citizens of the U.S.?
It's an excellent comment and an excellent statement. I don't have very much to add to it. I think Robert's point about all those IRS people that are being recruited should fill everyone with concern.
Sanjeva says, how likely are the Republicans to see the MAGA fracture more favorably now? Realistically, will this raid actually make a difference in the political landscape? If so, in what way?
I think it will make a difference. I think that establishment Republicans, the rhinos, if you like, if you want to call them that, I don't think they're ever going to accept the MAGA people. In fact, I think some of them quietly are hoping that the FBI and the Justice Department will come up with something as a result of this raid. I think they hate Trump every bit as much as they always have done. But I think that within the Republican Party, the MAGA group is gaining in influence all the time. And I think this is going to accelerate that, strengthen that trend.
From Jeff, thank you for that super chat. From Sparky, like Flynn, Alex Jones was betrayed by his lawyers.
Well, I think this is something that Robert knows a lot more about than I do. All I will
say
is this
talks about
it a lot. All I will say is that I read some of the things that the judge said. I discussed it on the live stream. I found them very strange. It's not just something, I'm going to correct that, inappropriate for a judge to say. And that seemed to me to corroborate all the things that Robert said, and it did look like Monty Python justice.
Joanna says, good morning from Los Angeles. Robert, what's next for Alex Jones? Will he appeal the verdict?
We asked that question and he answered it. He will, and hopefully it will go to the Supreme Court, the Texas Supreme Court, who will hopefully overturn this whole thing.
Tarkina says Hillary is fundraising on the raid, selling merch, but her emails, though. That was what Hillary had on her merchandise that she was selling. Yeah, this is true. She was selling merchandise on the heels of the raid. Pamela says, I think the whole thing is false. I think it's done to condition the public for the upcoming hellish tyranny and destruction coming our way. If they can do it to Trump, they can do it to anyone.
Well, I mean, I don't disagree with that. I mean, remember, he is a former president. And, the FBI comes to his house in this kind of way. They can do it to the former president of the United States. Of course they can do it, and will do it to other people.
Life of Brian says, this is the domestic version of the Ukraine farce where the Russians theoretically collapse in 5 days. These people have no sense of their limits.
Yeah, absolutely true. By the way, the last point is very true. They don't have any sense of their limits.
Not intimidated says defund, dismantle alphabet agencies. They have gone rogue.
Yes, I agree with that, actually. Certainly, I think the FBI and the CIA need a complete, well, I think not just a reorganization, but I think you're probably right. I mean, close them down, open up something in their place. Michael Flynn apparently was moving in that direction as Trump's national security advisor. And that was one of the reasons they were so keen to bring him down.
Carlos, thank you for that super sticker. El Loco says, free Julian Assange. Thank you for that, El Loco. Jeff Pearson says, Brian J. Auten wrote the FISA docs. Oh, okay.
Okay.
That's who Brian J. Auten is?
Oh, right, okay. Yeah.
Thank you for that, Jeff. Vincent, thank you for that super sticker. Red Pill Scholar says, thank you for all you do, gentlemen. Those who make peaceful revolution impossible will make violent revolution inevitable. John F. Kennedy.
Yeah.
Excellent quote. Not banned account says martial law fears are irrational, self-defeating.
Yes. I think that they are. I think if we start worrying about those things before they happen, then we're more likely to bring them on, and we shouldn't be intimidated by this sort of thing. I mean, a lot of people are angry and upset, and that is a good thing. And it'll probably strengthen the resistance, not weaken it, that this kind of event happened. And I think martial law. How does a president impose martial law on a country like the United States in peacetime?
AICI says, Bloomberg says UK may have organized blackouts because of energy shortage. When did we become Lebanon? I don't see how social unrest is unavoidable.
Well, there is already social unrest here in Britain. If we're talking about Britain now, there is already social unrest here. You come across it all the time. There are now, as I said, lots of strikes. When I returned to London, I was massively held up because airport workers were not turning up at the airports because they're not paid enough to keep up with the cost of living crisis, as it's euphemistically called. And I was reading this morning in the media that we've had the sharpest fall in real wages since records began. So, of course, there's already social unrest. People not turning up to work because they don't feel that what they're getting paid is remotely sufficient for their needs. That's already an act of social unrest, and we're going to see a lot more.
Brian, thank you for that super sticker. EHEF says, I don't understand where they got evidence. He may have classified documents. All I know is the archive people said he did.
Yeah, that's true enough. I mean, they say it, so it must be true. I mean, that's the kind of approach that this judge appears to have taken, who signed off on the warrant. I mean, they said it, so it must be true.
Peter says, the action against Trump shows how desperate the left is. Do you think the left will even allow the midterms in November to take place?
I agree about the desperation. I think it is a desperate throw. But as I said previously, if they try and stop the midterms happening, then, as I said, we're in a crisis the like of which the United States has never known. I mean, remember, in 1861, the Constitution was still functioning. I mean, the president was inaugurated, Congress was convened, action, the government continued to work, the courts continued to work, elections continued right through the Civil War, or war between the states. In this case, all of that would have ended. It'd be a far worse crisis than the crisis that existed at that time.
From ThinkPad 20, same FBI which refused to answer question after question under oath about January 6th. It's a lawless organization which should be dissolved.
Indeed, and of course they stonewalled all inquiries over the course of Russiagate. I can remember how they were constantly refusing or failing to provide information to congressional committees when congressional committees asked for it. So yes, I agree. I mean, that's exactly what the kind of organization that the FBI has become.
Photos of Denver says, good day, gentlemen. Thanks for covering this topic. This is beyond insane. Alex, thanks for the mini tour of St. Sava. It's beautiful. Thank you for that. Photius of Denver. Thank you for that. Jeff Pearson says, Deep Throat and Auten, both from South Idaho. Thank you for that, Jeff. Jeremiah says, this move has awakened the sleeping lions, total game changer, and has infuriated many. The other side may be done playing rope-a-dope.
I think that this was a huge mistake. Now, the only thing I would say is the Republicans have a genius of not using effectively their opponents' mistakes. But this was such a massive mistake, and Trump is different in this respect from establishment Republicans. I would be surprised if it doesn't have a big impact.
From Jeff Pearson says, Federalist Society connected to conspirators? ?
I don't know this. I've not heard about this.
From Marcus, thank you for that super chat. From Celila, thank you for that super sticker. Paulie says, Trump had the files of the ones that created and spreaded the coup.
Possibly.
Thank you for that. Tracy, Putin is going to make such a meal out of this, rightly so. Hashtag Empire of Lies.
Yeah, I mean, he's already, he coined the expression Empire of Lies. But you know what I think he's going to do about this affair in the United States? Say as little about it as possible. Allow it to play out within the United States. I think if Putin himself becomes involved, says some things, tries to, capitalize it, on the contrary, it will play into the Democrats' hands. So I don't think he's going to say anything.
Jinsha says, Robert, is there going to be a Nuremberg trial for the deep state globalists coming soon? The opposing power structure will be back in power, then all the present actions will be dealt justice? ?
Well, I mean, that's for Robert, I suppose, but I would say that sooner or later, some kind of reckoning in the United States must come if we are to have the United States. I mean, that it seems to me is obvious. How it will happen and when is another question. And what damage will be done in the meantime, that is, of course, a very big question.
Mian Mysar says, didn't the GSA pack up inventory all these documents when Trump left the White House? Pack up an inventory, all these documents when Trump left the White House.
I presume they did. And I mean, there's a lot of stories about, what the archivist who was apparently behind a lot of this prosecution. He seems to have got himself incredibly worked up. There's a story that he's not a story. He apparently has gone around saying that he saw Trump leaving the White House in a helicopter with somebody walking behind with a white bag, and he was already asking himself, what is in this white bag and all that. I mean, I think borderline bonkers stuff, actually. But anyway, you would have thought, one would assume, that when a president leaves the White House, the bureaucracy, which he only, nominally controls, would make a very careful audit of what he took with him.
Gordana, thank you for that super chat. Brian, thank you for that super sticker. Jeff says, are neocon and liberals a neo-manifest destiny?
Yeah, I think you've described it very well. Only don't confuse it with the manifest destiny that you heard so much about in the United States in the 19th century. I mean, that was something which perhaps had some meaning at that time. Not perhaps a meaning I particularly like, but there we go. But these people are undoubtedly on a mission, and it's a very dangerous one.
G-Dog 2K says, any further Trump voting for me died with his pardon selections. Free Julian Assange.
Yeah, I would simply say about that, yes, you can be very disappointed with Trump, and I am on lots of things. I think he made mistake after mistake after mistake. But ask yourself this question. At this particular moment in the history of the Republic, what are the alternatives to Trump? Who are his opponents? Why do they oppose him? If you ask yourself all of those questions, then you might say to yourself, yes, he's done all these mistaken things, all these foolish things. He acted with lack of courage, perhaps, on occasions, lack of principle in others. But he is still the only person, or rather he is the front person in this pushback against forces that are far more sinister and far more dangerous than anything we've seen in the recent history of the Republic.
Akram, thank you, gentlemen. Love your programs. Thank you, Akram, for that. Sparky says, Pompeo kept Trump from pardoning Assange and had Soleimani assassinated while Trump was in Florida.
Yeah. I mean, I gather, by the way, that Julian Assange's lawyers are now bringing a personal case against Mike Pompeo. So it's going to be very interesting. Mm-hmm.
Marcus says, Magistrate Judge Bruce Reinhart, who signed off on the Trump Mar-a-Lago raid, was Epstein employee's lawyer in 2008.
Yeah. Lots of people have been pointing this out to us over the course of this program. I mean, it is interesting. I mean, why of all the hundreds of lawyers and magistrates in America did they choose that one?
Bubba Smith says the real fight. Yeah, the real fight here is globalist versus nationalists. Trump is a nationalist.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that's absolutely right.
Callan says, why do you like Trump? I dislike him personally. While he was president, he did none of the things he promised. He hired more deep state operatives in his admin. I think he's not ideal. We need better.
I think Trump, he's certainly not ideal, and I've never suggested, Alex has never suggested, we've never suggested, Robert has never suggested that he's ideal. I mean, on the contrary, he's a profoundly flawed person. I think a lot of his mistakes come from the fact that, politically speaking, he has been an amateur. When he when he campaigned for the presidency, when he started campaigning for the presidency back in 2015, 2016, he'd never held elected office. So it's unsurprising that he's made mistakes, many, many mistakes. And yes, he's got personality traits, which are not, my favorite things. He's made bad personnel selections. He's been easily led along wrong paths. And yet, firstly, as a person, as a human being, he is not as bad as people say. In fact, not remotely. I mean, look at the number of cases they brought against him. Look at the number of allegations of corruption and tax evasion and whatever they've tried to hang on him. And none of them have held together. And that in itself tells you something about his business and the way he runs it and his personal life. The second is, at so many levels, he is an extremely skilled politician. He understands and likes the American people. He understands and loves the United States. Can you say that about his adversaries? I would say, of course not.
From Mark Hill, and I will say it again, no midterms. Social unrest causes martial law to be enforced, allowing Democrats to remain in power.
Yeah, as I said, I personally don't think we're going to see that happen. If we do, as I said, it's a crisis on a scale that we've never seen in the United States.
Bella, thank you for that super sticker. My name is Earl. My name is Earl. Why was Sandy Hook demolished if they had nothing to hide? Thank you for that. Sad Ferret, thank you for that super chat. Frank O'Reilly, thank you for that super chat. Zandanga says, thanks to Duran and Barnes for AG, loyal admin, blow the whistles loud. Thank you very much for that. War Wagon says, maybe the deep state is trying to incite a violent reaction by Trump supporters, declare a national emergency and suspend November's elections.
Yes, I mean, as I said, I understand all of this, and I don't think so, actually. I don't think this was intended to be a provocation. I think this is a Garland comes across to me as one of these rather unintelligent people who imagine themselves to be extremely clever, and I think he thought that he could do this and that he would scare Trump and that Trump wouldn't talk about the raid, and if he did, it would be embarrassing for him. I don't think Garland understood what the effect of all of this would be. So I don't think Garland has that kind of intelligence. So I don't think this was a provocation. And I come back to what I said. If they really want to stir up people in that kind of way, then the most likely outcome will be a Republican landslide in November. I do not believe that we're going to see conservatives rise up with pitchforks to march on Washington in that kind of way. And if there's any attempt to cancel the elections or suspend or stop the elections, then to be straightforward about it, as I said, we are in a situation in the United States that we have never seen before.
Sage and Fool says, did the jury have to be unanimous?
I don't know. This is a question for Robert, I think. I mean, I'm not sure what
Sticky Mark says.
Yeah. Presumably about Alex Jones.
Alex Jones, probably.
Yeah.
Sticky Mark says, Alex, see, here's the future clown world. That kind of goes with President Trump's home being raided. The whole S show, Carnival, ends when Poland invades Germany. What do you think?
Well,
Poland invading Germany. Thank you for that super chat. Lord Pepsi says, thank you for all your valuable contribution. Joan Moore, thank you for that super chat. Sabrina Liston says, the commentary is excellent, but its content beyond troubling. A great combo, the Duran and Barnes. Thank you for that. Phil Milley, thank you for that super sticker. No Sense, seen from the outside, Trump election is clearly U.S.'s last chance. Hope the Americans will be lucky enough to be spared the too close to notice blindness.
It is a very consequential election. The midterms are very consequential. Every election since 2016 has become more important than the one before, because we are now, to be straightforward about it, in a race. I mean, the longer, as I said, this reckoning takes, the more danger there is for the institutions of the Republic.
Black Tie says, have some fiat, guys. Great to see you together. Thank you for that. War Wagon says, if they try to put Trump in jail, they'll ignite a civil war. God help us. Evil is on the loose.
I hope they don't do that. I mean, I don't know about igniting civil war, but I think it would be a disastrous act of folly.
Michael says, gentlemen, a fantastic analysis each day. Ralph Peterson says, who will have the stones to put down these corrupt judges and federal agencies? Thanks for your work. Cactus Ray says, thank you for covering this topic with Robert Barnes. Seth Levense says, democracy long lost versus media, political, corporate, big tech, and subverted legislative, executive, and voting judicial last hope. Can Trump do anything?
Well, by himself, no. I mean, coming back to what we've discussed about Trump, I mean, he's only a human being. He's only one person. A political movement led by him, which maintains its focus and its discipline to a greater extent than it did between 2016 and 2020, might achieve an awful lot.
Radio Cerbonas, thank you for that super sticker. Sparky says, I'm good old days. It was called a star chamber.
It's very true. Star Chamber, for those who don't know, was a chamber in the old Palace of Westminster, which burnt down in the 1820s, I believe. But that was where there was a court that used to exist under the English system, where they used to carry out all kinds of interrogations of people who were seen as politically suspect. The Court of Star Chamber, and of course it ended during the time of the English Civil War.
Asavet MD, thank you for that super chat. Pratrap, thank you for that super chat. Jeremiah says, like seeing the guys together in Greece. Thank you for your work. As for me, it's a go-to show every day. Thank you for that, Jeremiah. Summer of 1970 says, sometimes the light's all shining on me. Other times I can barely see. Lately it occurs to me what a long, strange trip it's been. Jerry Garcia.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for that quote. Max Perry says, respect to the Duran community from Liverpool, UK. Thank you for that, Mark Perry. Portas Shell says, was Cuba the victim of a U.S. sabotage attack today? A U.S. sabotage attack today?
Who knows? I mean, I don't know one way or the other. I don't think we have that information. I did notice, by the way, that some Democrats who are very keen to impose sanctions on everybody else want sanctions to be eased on Cuba after this attack. By the way, I think that despite this attack, Cuba's position economically has suddenly become better. Its prospects have become better because now I suspect they're going to get more Russian and perhaps even Chinese investment than they would otherwise have done, because those two governments, the governments in Russia and China, are probably feeling less concerned about going into Cuba and building it up again, because they don't feel they have any bridges left to the US that they want to preserve.
Athanasios, thank you for that super chat. Mab says, have a discussion live with Matthew Errett of the Canadian Patriot Org. Please, panel. Thank you very much. We'll try to get that put together. Professor Tom says, I have to disagree with Robert. Jared Leto's character in Lord of War. That's not Zelensky. That's Hunter Biden. Very true. Ben Redword says, rest in peace, USA. Welcome to UBRA, the United Banana Republics of America. Sad.
Well, it is extremely sad. I don't think we're quite there yet, but I mean, when people like DeSantis talk like that, I mean, you know, you could see the concerns. I mean, this was a terrible thing. It was the sort of thing that does happen in arbitrary and misgoverned states. You don't expect to see something like this in the United States, and that's not to idealize the United States and what it was. It is simply to say that there has been a decline, a serious decline.
JZH for Freedom says, that's why we all need to go out to vote and to make down the algorithm.
Yeah, absolutely. Well done. That's exactly right.
Kalin says, Trump is a false hero. Let's not forget who he pardoned and who he didn't. Let's not forget he helped create the coup scam by signing spending bills.
I've never called him a hero. And I don't like that expression anyway, because, I don't want to get into this, but I think that this is a misjudged word to describe Trump or pretty much any human being. Heroic, people can be heroic in things they do, but a hero, let's avoid that kind of language. He is a very deeply flawed political leader, undoubtedly, though I think he's probably learnt more, about who's on his side and who's not, and the sort of things he should do. But again, ask yourself this question: who opposes him and why? The forces which oppose Trump are some of the most sinister forces I have ever seen in the United States, in all of its history. And that must tell you something about Trump. That must give you some reason for thinking rather better of Trump than you appear to do.
Jetset.1 says, I see some negative chats mentioning that Trump did this and Trump did that. This program is not about if you like Trump or not. It's about U.S. justice.
This is also true. Very good point. Absolutely.
Jincha says, Alexander, it's Snake Island singular or Serpent Island or Zimni, not Snake's Island plural. Have a great day. Then the islands, then the
So
island
many
will
people.
be happy.
I've heard so many people tell me about this. I mean, I've just lost track of it. Somebody also told me, by the way, that it gained its name. It's actually a Greek name originally, and that it came from Greek mythology, and it was the place where Achilles, the Greek hero, was supposedly buried. I mean, one learns all sorts of new things all the time. But there we go.
Noodles Mama says, Ben Franklin, we need a revolution every 200 years because every government becomes stale, corrupt after 200 years.
Yeah, well, absolutely. And in fact, America has produced many studies, not just from Ben Franklin, about this. There's a particularly brilliant book by a man called Michels, who was an American, quite what you'd call him, sociologist, philosopher, in which he talked about the iron law of oligarchy, that any system, even a democracy, contains within itself a trends towards oligarchy. And Michels, by the way, is a good example of this because eventually he went to Italy and became a fascist. He left the United States.
Gorgon says, some U.S. black liberation movements have also had FBI raids in recent weeks, most notably Uhuru in St. Louis and St. Petersburg, Florida, headquarters accused of doing something with Russians.
Yeah, well, we've already discussed this. I mean, I don't have anything more to say. I don't know very much about the story. I do know that it's provoked a lot of concern and that some conservative commentators have criticised it.
Khalid says, I agree this is about U.S. justice. I agree FBI is out of line. Trump is not the hero we think he is. He's not going to solve anything, sadly.
Well, I don't know about not going to solve anything, sadly. But, basically, I agree with that point completely. I mean, this is more than Trump, much more than about Trump as a person.
Otnosen says Trump didn't create the shot. That's absurd. That's absurd. On the contrary, he always emphasized treatment over the shot.
Yeah, well, I mean, people will remember, no doubt, the whole history of all that.
Callan says, at Otnosens, I disagree. Had Trump not signed $3 trillion in the spending, the coup would have died on arrival and we would have not had 2 years of hell.
Well, as I said, I think that in this program, we're not going to refight all those old battles.
Well, Otnosen says, at Kulianu, you disagree with the whole world. Then you disagree with the whole world who wanted the shot to be developed initially, and Trump's preferences are very well documented.
Yeah, well, okay.
And then Callan sends it back to Otnosens and says vaccine was wanted only because the shot had oxygen, because the disease had oxygen, and the disease got oxygen because of the pharma industrial complex, which was started in the USA.
Yeah, well, can I just say something?
And then Otnosens goes back and says, at Culiato, really, the fast track for creating the shot was set in March 2020. How could you blame Trump for acting on the info available at that time? And okay, that's the whole thread.
Well, can I just say, I mean, I love these discussions that take place on our threads, which they regularly do. What I would ask is, please always, our community, when you participate, and they're one of the great glories of our community, but do always remember to keep your courtesy, your manners, your respect for the other person's views. And I would just add something, by the way, which is that as somebody who's had to do massive amount of debating in my time, don't feel that you have to have the last word. I mean, because that can just keep things going indefinitely. Say what you have to say. The other person may not agree, and more often than not, just leave it at that.
James Johnson says, is the FBI now Plato's guardian class for the high priests and against the masses?
Well, about Plato's guardian class, all I will say this. I mean, the Plato, of course, wrote about the Republic. It seems to me that this isn't... The United States has no approximation at the moment to Plato's Republic. Perhaps that's a good thing, but to the extent that the FBI are behaving like the guardian class, then, I mean, it's a bad thing, except that the rulers of the Republic in Plato's Republic were philosopher kings, and one can't think of Merrick Garland as any kind of philosopher king. I mean, this isn't that kind of thing. It is a completely corrupted, rogue organisation, a rogue Justice Department, an Attorney General who's lost all sense of control and understanding of what his job is supposed to be, and things are spinning out of control. Very different from what Plato imagined.
Zugzuxi says, good evening, all great to be here. Thank you very much, Zugzuxi. Sanjeva says, nauseating to hear the racist leaders of Estonia and Finland requesting blockage of Russians to Europe. If they don't get a rebuke, persons from the global south will be next to be subjugated to this kind of rabid racism.
You're absolutely right. And by the way, I've been following more about the media outlets in India, and I'm discovering that they are making precisely those observations that you've just been making. This isn't going down well in the global south at all. I mean, they understand when these prejudices are real and when they're just synthetic, because of course they've experienced those prejudices in reality during the colonial period. So they're much more discerning and understanding of this than some people in the West are.
Satch says, trade Taiwan for Finland. Everyone happy. Colin Jones, thank you for that super sticker. Warwagon says, whoever thought a brash, loudmouth real estate tycoon from Manhattan may be the one who saves our beloved republic. Life sure can be funny.
Yeah, it can be very funny. But, that is the nature of democracy. Democracy does sometimes mean that, you get unexpected heroes turning up. That's what makes democracy democratic at the end of the day.
GDog2K says, as an American who has lived and worked in China and had successful U.S. career, you're on drugs if you think the U.S. has what it takes to stop China.
Well, I understand. I understand that. I think that the U.S. today, with the kind of organisation and political leadership it has, I agree. I think that to take on China, with this administration, it's a hopeless idea. But I think a differently organised, differently led, differently structured US has still a lot of things that it could do to maintain itself and to preserve its position as one of the leading powers. And I don't think it need to fear competition from China. That's my own personal view. But I agree with this government that the US has at the moment, it's looking very difficult.
Sparky says, after provoking the Ukraine war at the Munich, Kamala didn't want to do it again, so they sent Nancy. It's thought a woman could get on their last nerves.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with that.
We'll see. Thank you for that super chat. Paul, thank you for that super chat. Sparky says, the rape of Nanking, not Shanghai.
Okay. Correct.
Thank you for that, Sparky.
That is completely correct. By the way, I've been to Nanjing, and people have vivid memories of it there.
Matthew says, President Richard Nixon had a brilliant understanding and built a strong relationship with China. The Chinese respected him.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great achievement. And, I mean, it was, in my opinion, the single most brilliant move during the Cold War. It changed the complete geometry of the Cold War. And there is a direct line between that event and the fall of the Berlin Wall and the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1989-91. So, I mean, it was a brilliant move by Nixon. I mean, he was a flawed person. I didn't like him at all. I remember him well. But he did make this brilliant strategic move. And it's all been thrown away. I mean, Kissinger has just given an interview. Alex has covered it in one of his programs, in which you could see Kissinger lamenting the way in which the imbeciles in charge of the US government today have thrown away that massive advantage that Nixon gave them.
Jetset.1 says there were many protests in Taiwan during the Pelosi visit. Taiwan was used as the unsinkable aircraft carrier by the Japanese to invade China in 1937.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that is perhaps one of the positive things that's come out of the Pelosi visit. Many, many Taiwanese, who are, highly educated people, can see that they're being used by the neocons and they don't want to be used. Now, many of them may not be particularly attracted to China or the political system there, but they understand that the situation was stable until it was destabilized by egregious actions like this visit.
Gordon Nash, thank you for that super chat. Jean Judy, thank you for that super chat. Dahlia, thank you for that super sticker. Warwagon says, thanks, fellas. I came to the show racked with morose fatalism. Now I'm leaving with a double dose of hopium. Warwagon. Jacob says, what country should we move to skirt the coming economic crisis?
Well, Alex has just been to Serbia and was quite impressed by what he found there. So maybe there's a place. Don't come to Britain. That's all I can tell you.
Try to find the place you like if you're able to move. I mean, I don't know what everyone's situation is.
Yeah.
But
I say that about Britain, by the way, with enormous sorrow, because I love Britain very, very much, but the situation here is very bad.
Jetset.1 says, just heard that Trump threatened unfriendly countries to send Pelosi and Harris if he becomes president and force them to listen to their incoherent speeches. Well said, Kurt.
He has a sense of humor. That's one quality Trump does have. I mean, he does have a real sense of humor.
Yes. Mr. Black says, GATCA FACTA is enforced by banks. The U.S. and China haven't signed on to GATCA yet. Banks are a vehicle to enforce each government tax in their jurisdiction.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Very true. And from Joanna, a super sticker. Thank you, Joanna. That's everything.
Wow, there we go. Great program, fantastic program. And as this crisis, it's taken us time because obviously I had to travel back from Greece and there were lots of things to do when I got back. So it's taken us time to cover your questions, and our apologies for that. But as Alex said at the start, remains a very, very topical story. It's a huge story, actually. I mean, it's, in my opinion, as big in its own way as Ukraine, Taiwan is, because the United States remains the fulcrum of the international system. Still.
Yeah. We will leave it there, everybody. The Duran.locals.com, Duran Shop, 10% off. Use the code. Good day. Take care.